All right, what's going on, everyone? I'm here once again with the boy Bryce Miller Booker B. We're doing our early BT7 tier list. Bryce, how are you feeling about the format so far?
Uh, it's pretty fun so far. I'm enjoying it. The only issue I have a little bit is that some decks feel like they're interacting with you while you can't interact with them. But overall, I'm having a great time.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a big refresher after BT6 EX1, which kind of felt like one big long format with like a bonus like
Yeah,
expansion pack or something like that.
it
Yeah.
did. It was a pretty balanced format, and then Ice Wall was released.
Yeah, and then Ice Wall came and like dunked on everyone. But now there's no Ice Wall. Well, there's one Ice Wall,
There's one Ice Wall,
and
still good.
yeah, it's still good. That deck is still good, but we'll get there. So, all right, so we have our tier list here up on the classic tier list maker.com.
Hmm.
It's in Spanish, but it's okay. We won't worry about that. I can translate for you guys.
I think only like one of like a couple of the decks are listed in
Yes,
Spanish.
yes. Green Ruleta. We can say that's green. Gotcha. That's gotcha green for you guys. So, Bryce, you want to start us off with the first few decks?
Oh yeah. So we're just gonna start off right with a big shotgun. We're gonna put all these decks in for fun.
Yeah.
We're gonna go Azulong, Hexaplow, Green Rouletta,
Yeah.
Aosmon, Shoutmon, All Force,
Yeah. We're just
Kresgarurumon,
showing
OTK.
throwing all these guys in freaking for fun. Yeah, these are decks that you really only want to be playing literally if you're trying to have fun. Machine Dramon is for fun too, right?
It's those are the top of for fun. It's almost tier 3.
Yes, man. Okay, we can put it at the very top.
It's almost not a for fun deck. Almost.
Oof. Yeah, so we're just gonna knock those out and then get straight to the meat of the list. So, do you want to just go in order here on the list?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so first we have Deoboromon in black. Very popular at the end of EX1 format because I had a good Gabumon matchup, and now Gabumon is like not really a thing. So, what are we thinking about this deck, Bryce?
This deck is pretty solid. It's just it didn't get any new cards. It's just got new matchups. I'd say it's a strong tier 2 candidate. It's still when it's allowed to go off. It's allowed to do broken things.
Yes.
But it just has consistency issues because you really have to get the stack built up. But their stack is really strong. It like hard counters some stacks once they get it set up. Like if you get a bunch of Diaboromons that are level 6 tokens, Yellow Hybrid actually can't clear it.
Yeah, I was thinking the very same thing because it's like Deoboromon is a slow deck, so when it goes against another slow deck, that gives it time to set up like all its erratas and then get like 30 tokens on the board. Like, what are you gonna do?
It really strong once it gets set up, and also but it is a little inconsistent and is incredibly dependent on its one tamer. If you don't get the one tamer, your deck feels very weak.
Yep, that's very true. All right, so that's Deoboromon, pretty solid tier 2 deck. D Brigade, how are we feeling about D Brigade? So this is to clarify. There's D Brigade and there is Dark Knight Aggro, which are technically pretty much the same deck. So for this one, we're gonna say this is the D Brigade that's just pure D Brigade, no Dark Knight stuff. It's the one with like Ogremons and like maybe some more like security controller stuff.
Yeah, I'll say this D Brigade has more tech options that are like more room for tech options to gotta like get more security bombs, more defense. But if I was to rank both of them, they're probably both similarly strength. They're both tier 2. They are pretty decent in that they are floaters, so they are pretty resilient to removal. But you know, you're D Brigade. Sometimes you're not hitting your floaters. Sometimes you play against a deck that just outscales you completely.
Right.
But you're really you're trying to just keep swinging. Hopefully that gets you somewhere, and sometimes that gets the tamer players set up.
Yeah. Any deck that has to swing to get advantage, I feel like, is kind of in a poor position this format. Because swing
with like 2 exceptions.
Yeah, 2 exceptions, very true. But those are decks that can get really fat checks all at once. So that's fair. All right, so those are. Let's keep going with black decks. Actually, then I think there's Royal Knight blockers. So I think this is tier 3, right? This is not.
Yeah, this is
Craniumon has lost a lot of value this format.
It's lost a lot of value. You're in a format with a yellow deck first of all, which last format really didn't have a yellow deck. Now they have the best counter to Craniumon, and it's really good.
Yep.
On top of the fact that this deck was already kind of bordering tier 3 last format, it has some strengths. Like obviously, Craymon's really annoying for some decks, but it's just not that powerful. It's slow. It has not a crazy good win condition. It kind of just is a toolbox, but the toolbox doesn't have it has drills and not power drills.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. All right, so let's talk about probably the best quote unquote black deck, X Antibody. How do we feel about that deck? I have some thoughts, but I'll let you go first.
I think it's a solid tier 2 deck. It's basically Shoutmon better, but Jessmon worse.
Yeah.
It's more consistent than both of those decks, which is why it's better than Shoutmon. And it kind of just builds a stack that does a lot of checks, but it feels like it's missing pieces. And this deck is really the set 8, set 9 waiting room.
Yeah,
that deck will shoot up in value once its new cards come out. It's missing the good cards from that archetype that are coming out later.
Yep, definitely good card waiting room. I will say that if you can't get rid of their what's the boss, Dorugamon?
Yeah. Dorugamon?
Yeah, if you can't get rid of it like in a turn or two and it just sits on their board, it gets so much value that sometimes like you can't break through it and win. Like they'll just win.
Yeah. It is also nice that their level 5 protects it for a turn from everything basically, except for combat.
Yeah. So,
it can't be deleted or DP reduced, and it's already huge, so it's not normally dying to combat.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good strength for the deck, but overall, it feels like it's not quite there. It's almost a incredible deck.
Yeah, it's like a protect the president deck. Like keep your Dorugamon alive, and like that's how you win. But if you don't, then it's kind of feels bad. All right, so that's all the black decks. Let's go purples.
Black's weak, but don't worry, black players. The future is coming, and you will start swinging hard soon.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
You'll finally have the deck you need.
Good card waiting room. The black experience.
Not for long.
For long. All right, let's go into purple from here. So first purple deck on here is Turbo Lucamon. You want to elaborate on what that deck is specifically?
I would say there's two main versions. So there's the one of the big boss kits that came out this set is Cherubimon. And I'd like to think Cherubimon has like two viable variants. One is the purple base, which kind of goes into like the Lucamon package. Lucamon, when you have his security option, Dead or Alive, is an insane card.
Yeah.
That when you get that off in security, it's probably the most game swinging broken option in the game.
It feels so unfair. Like you swing in security, it's like, oh, Dead or Alive. It feels worse than Ultimate Flare against security control. It's so bad.
Not only does Dead or Alive let you kill a unit, it spawns level 5 body, which lets you go into your boss creature the following turns.
Yep.
It's so powerful. However, the Cherubimon engine is slow, and not hitting Dead or Alive, the deck is inconsistent.
Yeah.
So this base, I will say, is kind of weaker than the other base, but it has more high roll potential to just steamroll a game because you hit Dead or Alive.
Yep. I have to agree. I think it's like Dead or Alive in security, or the deck feels significantly worse.
That said, I was playing a more memey version of a Dead or Alive deck, and you still also have to get the Cherubian trash before you Dead or Alive, which is also a problem with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it can't summon from hand or anywhere else. It has to be from trash.
Yeah. All right, so what do you think about this? Tier 2?
I think
tier 3?
I think it's a tier 2 deck, because the Cherubimon base is still solid. It's a really good control strategy. It has like a mini Shine Greymon effect, and on top of like a board resilient effect.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's better than all the rogue black decks strictly because hitting Dead or Alive in security is just such a bomb.
Yeah,
but it's probably not that much better than X Antibody.
No, it's probably similar strength.
All right, so we'll put those next to each other. Okay, next, this is a deck that you and I did a profile. Oh, you want to say something?
I'll say really quick. Let's go back.
Sure.
Let's finish talking about Cherubimon since we were already talking about it.
Okay.
Hybrids.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So you want to talk about Cherubimon, the Cherubimon Tamers here, this one?
Yeah, we'll say Cherubimon Tamers.
Okay.
So with the yellow base, this is the other version of Cherubimon. Is we have a yellow base, we play yellow rookies, and a couple Blinding Rays. This version of Cherubimon, it has a lot of similar strengths. Not the Dead or Alive package, but the hybrid package. And unfortunately, purple has like one of the weaker hybrid packages. It doesn't have like...
Yeah, I agree.
Though it doesn't really get that much from it. However, this deck has a very, very, very good matchup against a tier 1 deck.
Yes.
Arguably the best deck in the game. This deck hoses that deck.
Yes.
Everyone I've seen play this deck says it's like a 9-1 matchup.
Yes.
And that fact alone gives it like a 1.5 status.
Yeah, so just to be clear, we're talking about the yellow hybrid matchup for this deck.
Yep.
This deck, it's almost unlosable if you're Cherubi, if you're playing yellow hybrid. Cherubi yellow base, to be specific.
Yeah.
Which is this deck. So, I know I'm going to skip it for this video, but in my past tier list videos, I've said what my criteria are for where I put decks in tier lists, and Bryce has a pretty similar criteria as well. And
I disagree with tier 1 just slightly.
Fair enough. But okay, so what we're going to say is that since this deck has a pretty good matchup into the field and also has a very strong matchup into a tier 1 deck, I think that makes it pretty much tier 1.5,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah, tier 1.5 for sure.
All right, and then the last, there was one more. Oh, just straight purple hybrids. This one we're just throwing away, right?
We're throwing this one away just because we have 2 purple hybrid decks. These are all the same decks, same base, so.
All right.
If you're thinking about the new purple hybrid only tamer, that's a meme deck, but we're not.
Yeah,
that card doesn't matter.
Ancient Sphinxmon.
That card's not card. That card's real bad.
Yeah, that's for fun for sure. All right, so moving on to Lilith Loop, which is something that you and I have done a profile on before, and we were saying it was probably the best deck in the format. And you love this deck, and I think just from playing against it more, it's definitely a tier 1 deck for sure. Is it the best deck? I think it has some questionable matchups, and I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I will say this is a tier 1 deck, and this is the biggest reason we disagree on tier list, is because I think you said tier 1 deck has to carry you. This deck does not carry you. This deck is very hard to play.
Yeah.
But the power of this deck, you saw it last format. At the end of the format, it was probably the second best deck behind Gabumon. This deck is crazy when it works. Even without Mega Digimon Fusion, this deck is so good. And this is the best facilitator to the broken stuff we get this format, which is the Eismon package.
Yes.
It has a pretty solid yellow matchup, yellow hybrid matchup, but it is still a difficult matchup. It's not like we're favored, but we still have to win the game.
Yeah.
Because that deck is so good. Its biggest problem is that it has a pretty subpar blue matchup, because if your stuff doesn't die, then they just get to tell your stuff to not die ever.
Yeah.
And it has a really, really bad red matchup. Red hybrid specifically. Yes. This deck's always had a problem with bursty aggro decks, and that deck literally can just not care about what you're doing and kill you.
Yep.
Which is this deck's biggest problem.
Yeah, you even threw Rebellion back into your deck just because it felt so bad to play against red.
I had to cut a rookie. You know how hard that was?
Oof. Yeah, so Lilith, I think still... It's almost not even Lilith Loop anymore. It's just fucking Cerberusmon beatdown, basically. Cerberus Loop.
Eismon Cerberus Loop with Lilith as the backup plan for late game.
Yeah. Yeah, but for sure tier 1. And yes, I have said before that if the deck is hard to play, maybe it's a lower tier or at least 1.5. But for this one specifically, I don't think it's that hard to go Gabumon into Eismon scatter mode, swing base, and then drop 2 Eismons. So.
Yeah, your starting plays, if you get that starter, the game is not as hard as it was before. But everything else you have to do around it is still pretty complicated.
Yes. You have to figure out how to get your rushes out and how you can manipulate your memory. It's a deck that requires a lot of practice and time invested into it in order to get the most out of it. All right, so purple aggro. So this is pretty much just the Eismon deck, essentially.
Yeah, this is take away all of the top end of Lilith Loop, and which is probably arguably the best version of purple. Take away the top end, try to go face, just spawn Eismon, security +1. Yep. It's a little bit more consistent than Lilith Loop, but you sacrifice your end game power, which is pretty significant. I've been testing a little bit. I haven't played all the matchups, but it's tier 2 with room to grow, maybe a tier 1.5 deck.
Yep.
But it's tier 2 right now, I'd say.
Yeah, we'll put it at the top of tier 2. It's probably a little better than Next Antibody, just because Eismon is pretty dumb.
Yeah, it's basically just make the broken card work, and the broken card's good. All
right, last purple deck on this list is Titamon. What do you think about Titamon, Bryce?
So another way to play Eismon. It's probably a tier 2 deck, at least. Yeah. It might be tier 1.5 just because it's purple aggro is probably the weakest variant just because it doesn't have a top end. It's all of the Eismon decks without a top end.
All right, we'll put it tier 2, but we'll put it in front of purple aggro.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. All right, moving on. We'll leave Ragna and Rookie Rush and Security Control for last, since those aren't really like one color decks. I guess let's talk about yellow. So we'll start with Lord Nightmon. Okay, I'm gonna start off talking about this one just because
you played this deck.
I have some thoughts about this deck. So this deck it's fun to play. It's not the same Lord Knight from BT5 where it was like aggro control swarm. If you want to play a deck that kind of does that, you should probably be playing like red green hybrid. And like this Lord Knight is more of like a combo swarm deck where like if you hit all your pieces, then you can spit out 4 rookies and champions in one turn and you just go super super wide. The problem is hitting your combo pieces in order to make that happen. And also, I will say that Lord Knight is a deck that has to attack to gain advantage, which kind of inherently makes it kind of crappy into yellow hybrids, which is pretty tough. That's my take on the deck. What do you think,
I would
Chris?
imagine the deck had a good yellow matchup because it just builds up like it gives them time to build up their thing. But
You have to, like I said, you have to draw like the perfect cards. Like, and if you're drawing perfect cards, you might as well be playing Jessamon, because like if you hit Lord Knight and then you go wide, like they just go Schwartz or they just go Shine. And you're just like, damn it.
if you're just taking too much time, they've set up the children.
Yeah.
So I think we could say it's probably like a tier 2, maybe tier 3 deck.
This is for sure a tier 2 deck. I don't think it's tier 3. I think if you
the Lord Mon engine's just good enough.
Yeah, if you draw your cards, then it's strong. The problem is that you have to draw your cards in the right order. So it's fine. It's fun. That's for sure. But
yeah, I've yet to play and see it go off yet, but I've seen it go off on some YouTube channels before.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the other yellow deck, the big fat elephant in the room. I'm just gonna throw this up here because we know that's exactly where it's going. Yellow hybrids.
Absolutely, that's a tier 1 deck. That's it's arguably the best deck in the format right now. It is the deck to beat at the least. You have to make your deck able to beat this deck. If you can't beat this deck, you're getting grinded out of the game. You're getting grinded to oblivion. They have so much healing consistently. It basically just one-upped a deck that everybody hated from previous formats, and we'll get into that later.
Yes.
And just does everything way more efficiently. It's super hard to beat this deck.
Yes, it's just like efficient security control, which makes it really annoying.
Yes, Jet Selfie-Mon is one hell of a card.
Yes, it is.
And on top of that, you have so much flexibility in this deck because you really are just putting like, I think 25 cards, and then you can just build the rest of your deck whatever you want. You just put your hybrid package of 12 cards, your tamer engine of like 11, 12 cards, and then whatever you want.
Yep.
And that's strong enough. Like this deck is crazy.
Yep, I agree. What I will say about yellow hybrid is that, like, coming from the Japanese format, which is obviously what we all look towards when we kind of decide what decks are going to be strong coming into the format, everyone was saying, oh, yellow hybrid is the deck to beat. Yellow hybrid is insane. This deck isn't crazy. And then it came here, and the Mega Digimon Fusion and Reinforced Memory like limits and bans, I feel like made actually a huge impact on the strength of this deck. Like, I don't feel like I'm playing against an unwinnable deck. Like, I feel like I have options when I play against this deck. So I think the Bandai did a good job with the list.
Yeah, I'd say without the limits, this and another deck would probably be like tier 0.5, tier 0 decks that by themselves.
Blue hybrids,
but
right? Yeah.
But because of that, these actually feel like beatable decks. And I feel like the strength of a lot of the tier 1.5 and tier 2 decks is that they have really good matchups into this deck.
Yeah.
That's like their biggest selling point, is that this is a tier 1 deck, but these decks counter this deck really well.
Yeah, I think it's become pretty obvious to me, at least, that Fusion, Reinforce, and Icewall were really gatekeeping a lot of different decks from like being good. And now that they've been like banned or limited, we're seeing so much more diversity in our meta, and I think that's really good.
Yeah.
So
I would argue that over all of those cards, even though we got a banned card in Mega Digimon Fusion, I think Ice Wall limited decks the most.
yeah, that pretty
it
much
prevented decks that wanted to attack ever.
Yes.
And now we have decks that can attack that feel really strong.
Yes, it allowed aggro decks to come back, which I think is fair. I think aggro decks should always be part of the meta.
Yeah, you should always have all kinds of decks, which are aggro, mid range, combo, and control.
Yep. All right, let's go next. Oh, we forgot a purple deck. 3 muskets.
Yeah, that's a.
Yeah, it's a
that's
purple.
not. It's a kind of a mixed
purple
deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mixed deck. Although I think they're hedging even more into purple than they were before.
Mm-hmm.
Muskets is, I would say, either tier 1.5, tier 2. It gets to play the Eismon stuff, although it's a lot harder to fit the Eismon stuff. I've seen builds that just don't even play the free summon. They're mostly doing it for the draw and discard. The scale deck still has crazy late game. You just build Starmon, and even against decks that obviously your removal is a lot weaker. You can't use your removal to just wipe boards because people are just their Digimon are hybrids, so they just hide their tamers at first. So they can't really kill those, but you can also just spam Nailbone, which makes it still at least viable. So I'd put this in like tier 1, 2, tier 2, 1.5. What do you think?
This is tough. I'm gonna say, just based on the strength of the deck last format, and since it's a strong late game deck, and you will be going late game against decks like Yellow Hybrid, probably, it's probably a 1.5. But what I will say is that if you're taking this to G-Fest and you go against the one guy who decides to throw Avenge Kidmon in his side deck...
You mean everyone who just plays the 1?
Yeah, you're just going to be so sad when you get Avenge Kidmon.
Inside deck, this deck has literally a card that says counter the deck. So it is, in Digifest format, it is definitely a tier down, or maybe a tier 3, but overall it's like tier 1.
Yeah, if you're going to Texas or Florida, maybe don't take 3 muskets. Yeah. All right, fair enough. So that was yellow, purple. All right, let's go red. We'll start with Agu Bond.
I will say this is out of the red decks available. It's probably the weakest red deck. I'd say it's tier 2. It still has pretty strong things. Greymon hits for checks a lot. It does a lot of damage. It still has a burst finisher. It can trash security, but a lot of the strength of this deck was its mix of aggro and with control security cards, and the control security cards are way weaker this format with hybrids. Like you can't kill tamers with Atomic Blaster, even though the card is good. So
agreed.
It significantly hurts the deck.
I will say that Craniumon being out of the meta basically is a huge buff to the deck. Just because Craniumon, like, hard shit on this deck, it would solo win games. Like, your opponent could literally hard play a Craniumon for 13 memory, and you would just scoop your cards up, basically.
That is fair. I went to a locals. This deck was still doing good. It got, like, top 3, so it's still definitely a playable deck. It has still good strength. It's just it's not quite the monster it was before, where it was like probably the 4th or 5th best deck in the format.
Yeah, and the new red hybrids are probably a good buff to it too. The new Burning Gray seems good. It's
another removal card. It's pretty strong.
Yep, you could probably take out Geo Gray, although I don't know if you would, but I guess you could.
I mean, if you also sometimes that deck also played a Goonie, you'd probably replace that slot or anything.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. All right. Fair enough. That's enough. Agubond. Jesmon, new Jesmon cards.
I will say this deck is borderline tier 1, but it's tier 1.5. Imagine a deck that has good matchups versus every single tier 1 deck. Its worst matchup, as it always has been, is itself.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Jesmon. Where do I even begin with Jesmon? Just Brick City, dude.
Its inconsistencies held it back. It got consistency tools in the new Huckmon.
Yeah,
lets you search out more sisters, and the new Sistermon that lets you heal, which is really strong.
Yeah.
But it has the same problems. Sometimes it's just you don't draw your cards in the order you need them to. When you do draw the cards in the order you need to, this deck is basically tier 0 if it has its line. It's so powerful when it's doing what it wants to do, but it can't always do that. And that's really a really big hindrance on the deck.
Yep. I will say about Jesmon is that if you draw your cards in the right order and you just high roll, it's probably a free win. Like, this deck just gets free wins if you high roll.
it is probably one of the best decks versus Yellow Hybrid, which is really good because any deck that's really slow gives you more time for your inconsistent deck to draw its pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Digifest format, this deck's probably even better because the mulligan is really strong for this deck, helping you make it more consistent.
That is correct. And speaking of red decks high rolling you for your life, red hybrid. What do you?
I will say also tier 1.5.
Yeah.
It has a pretty solid yellow hybrid matchup. I'd say the matchup is maybe slightly favored in red hybrid or even. And it has pretty good matchup versus Lilith Loop. It's just it has the similar problems as Jessamon, is that it's kind of inconsistent. It needs to get exactly the pieces it wants, which in this case would be a Flamemon, a Flamemon,
the piercing Flamemon.
Piercing Flamemon, but any Flamemon because blockers are less relevant right now. A Gunimon promo and Ancient Greymon. Getting that set up, you just start the game with them at 2 life or 1 life, and that feels great. But you don't always get that stack, and if you're not getting that stack, the deck feels a lot more fair. More of just like a 1 stack beatdown deck, although it can get to its 4 stack a little bit easier because the hybrid mechanic for level 5 Agunimon, or not Agunimon,
which one?
What's the...
Oh, Aldemon.
What's the Aldemon? The new level 5 Aldemon, the hybrid mechanic of Digivolving for 1 lets you get a pretty big, dangerous stack pretty early with your not doing your Ancient Greymon shenanigans.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. I will say that Emperor Greymon doesn't feel that scary. Like, it's just, okay, Blitz. That's fine. I'll allow it.
It's more so it feels like a finisher.
Yeah.
And it has the text that you can't block it, but because it exists, I mean, people don't want to play blockers anymore. So that is this deck alone did make me have to change my Lilith Loop deck because the matchup is so bad.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a respected deck. You should definitely fear this deck and build your deck around it. But it has consistency issues, and it's only doing one thing, and that's just trying to slam you in the face really fast, really hard.
Yes, the turn 2 warp into Ancient Greymon play feels really bad to go against. But I will say, oftentimes if they go for that warp, they kind of run out of resources after that because the Ancient Grey kills itself. So if you can stabilize after that, sometimes you can win out. Even though you're running at 1 or 2 security for the whole game, sometimes they can't get those last 2 checks against you just because they ran out of steam.
Yeah, it's very, very I would say it's the premier aggro deck in this format. It's just it has a little bit of removal in the Burning Greymon, the new one.
Yeah, well, it's a red
But
deck.
other than that, it doesn't remove stuff. It's just hitting you in the dome. Straight to the security stack with every check they have.
True. All right, so that's all the red decks that are pretty much relevant in this format. Let's move on to blue, and we'll leave this one. Let's talk Imperial Digimon first. Why not?
You mean starter deck waiting room?
Starter deck waiting room. Yeah. Okay. So I've played quite a bit of Imperial Digimon. To be fair, it was EX1 format Imperial Digimon, so I was playing with 4 Ice Walls. And even with the 4 Ice Walls, this deck was feeling pretty tier 2. And now that there's 3 less Ice Walls, meaning this deck has 0 defenses, I think it's actually tier 3. With the caveat that your yellow hybrid matchup is actually pretty decent because you have jamming, so you don't care about Zoe or Zephyrmon DP boosts. That's pretty much.
I can see that. You have a lot of burst damage. You could try to set up a play where you just take them out in 1 turn.
Yes, exactly.
And that's good against that deck.
Yeah, you can just do your 3 to 4 attack turn and then win with that. Other than that, I think the deck it's fine. If you want to play a blue deck, there's other blue decks you should be playing.
Yeah.
Mainly, I guess let's talk Gabubond and then we'll talk about blue hybrid. So Gabubond is the same deck as last format, except you take out 3 Ice Walls and you put in 3 Tommies. And then you can play Korikaku and Kumamon, I think it's called, right?
Yeah. I would say you make a little bit more changes. You try to fit in as much of the new hybrid package as you can. I think this is a solid tier 1.5 deck. Just because Gabubon is still a crazy card. It's just you have to fit so many cards into the deck, so there's not room for text slots or the entirety of the hybrid package, everything else. So it feels like because you're just jamming 2 engines together, 2 consistent engines, it doesn't quite always come together in both of them together, so it's can't really specialize as well as the other blue deck, which we'll talk about in a second. But it is really strong. You still are afraid of Gabumon checking you for 3 checks on top of the new blue stuff that just. Well, let's get into that.
Yep, let's talk about blue hybrids, which is without a doubt going up here. Without a doubt.
This is, yeah, arguably the best deck in the format over yellow hybrid. We'll see. It's has a bad yellow hybrid matchup, which is its biggest downside, but it's very well rounded, and it can basically have a decent matchup versus anything else. It's not exactly a control deck, which is yellow hybrid.
Yes, this deck sometimes feels like if. Okay, so the card I hate the most in this deck is actually Sora and Joe. That card feels so unfair because sometimes if they get that established, you're going to be passing over 5 memory every turn no matter what, and playing against 5 memory every turn actually feels so bad, especially if you don't see your own memory tamer. At that point, you might as well just scoop up your cards because they're going to have 5 memory, they're going to choke you to 1 every time, and then all your cards are going to get stunned so you can't attack. It feels so bad.
Yeah, this deck abuses Sora and Joe more than any other deck in the game. It's basically, what if Hexablow was a good deck? Yeah. It just tells it basically takes their cards, strips them of the sources, prevents them from doing anything, and these cards say this Digimon on their effects, so it doesn't matter if they Digivolve over it for that turn, they're still stunned for that turn, and they can just try to chain stuns until eventually the game is over. It has a lot of control elements, although it's still more like a tempo deck, like a tempo mid-range deck, but it feels so oppressive, you just can't make your Digimon do anything once they get established.
Yes. If you guys remember Refleximon in green, this is pretty much that, but it's like the whole deck, and it's way better. So
it's way better, and it happens off of off like champions and ultimates. And the thing that makes this deck probably better than Gabumon, even though Gabumon gets to run some of the cards in it, is how much more space you have to loop your cards. So the really big thing is you go a Tommy, which is the best tamer in the deck. You can Digivolve Korikakumon over that to stun the Korikakumon effect, and then go into Beowulf for 1, refresh the Korikakumon, bounce something, basically like tempo that out, while also stunning another thing. So you basically get 3. You can get 3 stuns back to back, and it's so hard to like do anything about that.
Yeah, it's so crazy. It feels like your whole board can attack. If you get out a level 6 against this deck, normally like your level 6 is like the big like crux of your deck, like that's what you're building around. But against blue hybrid, they just strip all the sources, perma-stun it, and then it's just fueling their Sora and Joe so that your opponent is just gaining 2 memory off of it every turn. It feels super bad. Super bad.
I would say the thing that kind of counters that playstyle wise is, I'd say one stack decks that do a lot once the stack comes out. But if your deck is kind of incrementally getting to level 6s, they're gonna have a bad time. So like Jessamon is probably decent. Red hybrid is probably like an even matchup, and then obviously its worst matchup is yellow, just because it kind of wins through chip damage, and yellow hybrid like thrives in chip damage because they're just recovering it all back. But other than that, it feels like it has no bad matchups. It's so good. It can play out of its bad matchups really well because it's a consistent blue deck.
I agree. So with this and yellow hybrids is pretty much like the 2 like top decks of the format. I think most people will agree with that. And there's really nothing much else to say.
Lilith has potential to be better than them, but you have to be a really good player and also draw your stacks. It also has a little inconsistent issues in that you still have to draw the scatter mode plus the Eismon to even contend.
All right, so let's talk about the last relevant hybrid deck, which is green hybrids. Specifically, I want to specify this is green hybrids with red base. Okay, the full green hybrid list, I've tried it. I've tried different ways to run it. It's copium. It's so copium. You have to.
It feels red. The green base feels very tier 2. We just don't have another like slot for it. It's playable. It still has good things. It's more controlly. But the addition of the red package to get that extra aggression, and that extra burst potential, and also even extra consistency because you get more searchers and a card that lets you draw cards in the promo Guilmon. Feels way better. Yeah,
this is pretty much Atomic Inferno, the deck. It abuses it better than the red hybrid deck, surprisingly, just because of Rhino Kabu's like semi-blitz ability, I guess you could call it. All right, but just playing with this deck, like me personally, okay, I will say the yellow hybrid matchup is super free when you're playing with this deck. It's so free. I've yet to lose against a yellow hybrid player with red base, green hybrid.
Have you gotten a game off? Have they gotten a game
Nope,
off you at
nope.
least?
I'm 6-0, 6-0, so 3 matches. It's not a big sample size, to be fair, and
Yeah, but it still looks really powerful. I
even
would say,
even the first game I played against yellow hybrid, I didn't really know what I was doing. My deck just carried me. Like it's so free.
yeah, I would say this and blue hybrid feel like the most well-rounded tier 1 decks. They have their their most consistent, have like the most game against everything. They have the least bad matchups and the most good matchups. They're just kind of like there's nothing polarized about the decks. They're very like
Yes.
right on the nail, except for in your words, you're saying it hoses yellow. But
Yeah. So green hybrids with red base. We're gonna specify with red base.
yes, green hybrids with red base.
Okay.
Don't play regular green hybrids. Get some
yeah.
red cards for your
Yes.
to assist your buggy friends.
Yes. You have a pretty fair matchup into everything. Like nothing feels unwinnable. If you lost, you can probably figure out where you misplayed. You can get aggressive. You can get controlling. Like this deck kind of does a little bit of everything, and it does it well. So if you're looking for a deck, yeah,
it has the green benefit of making all of your things cheaper, which is one of the strengths green has had for a while, but hasn't been able to use since like set 5. So,
yep. So I think this is a very very strong contender for tier 1. You can win against pretty much any other deck as long as you're playing your cards right.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. Tier 1, tier 1.
All right. So this purple hybrid one we were throwing away. All right. These are the last 3 decks. These are kind of just like the mishmashed color decks. So we'll start with regular old security control. How do we feel about this one, Bryce, and BT7?
This was my secondary deck for a while. This is the other deck I liked playing because I prefer combo and control decks. This deck is not yellow hybrid, and it is farly insignificant to yellow hybrid because what you were trying to heal before was removal, and removal does nothing against a hybrid deck.
Yeah.
It does a little bit if they start going into it, but they've probably already gotten value out of that. So it's so much weaker because of its matchup spread. It's still like core. The idea is good, but its matchup spread is so weak that it falls all the way to tier 3.
It just doesn't.
Tier 3, it just doesn't have the matchups to win the game anymore. It's not the deck's strength inherently, but Jet Selfiemon is better Magna Angemon, at least with this deck. Zorb Defeat is a good card. You saw the hidden security. Your reinforced member boost at 1, which is one of the best starters for your deck. So that also got limited in that potential.
Yes.
It drops way down. It's because the limits to the reinforced member boost and the really bad matchup spread. I mean, look at tier 1. You have 3 hybrid decks, which you're not interacting with, and Lilith, which already was favored in that deck.
Yeah. The meta spread is not looking good for security control at all, and it didn't really get any new tools, did it? Like at all?
It got like 1 red card if you want to play a red base, but I think red base isn't the way to go yet. I think this deck will come back once it's not the deck's fault, it's the matchup spread. Once other decks are really good that aren't just tamer, it's probably going to be a backup to like a tier 1, tier 1.5, tier 2 type deck. But right now, it's just not there.
Fair enough. All right, security control tier 3. You heard it here first.
Play yellow hybrid if you want to play security control. You can make a yellow hybrid deck that's similar.
Yeah, agreed. All right, Ragna Lordmon. So, do we want to talk about like the build of Ragna Lordmon now? We're talking about Tidal Wave, right?
Yeah. This is a Mega Zoo deck.
Yes.
We don't play regular Ragna. That's a for fun deck. Mega Zoo is not that much better. It's still like tier 3, like top of tier 3, but Tidal Wave is a crazy card when you can make it maximum value.
Yep.
Summon 2 bodies and your deck makes big stacks. So you make a Vmon, a Demi Vmon base, which is how most Mega Zoo decks play, and you're essentially trying to play your Zoo cards, evolve it into a free Ragnar Lord, and then spawn 2 bodies.
Yep.
Off of Tidal Wave. This deck's biggest saving grace is that it is very good versus Yellow Hybrid.
Yep.
One of the Yellow Hybrid's best removal is Shine Greymon, which they can't use until they set up, Suzanomon, which they can't use until they set up, or the Schwartz laser.
Yeah.
Which only kills level 5, which this deck does not play. It does not care about that.
Yep.
So it's like giving your opponent a ton of memory is really bad. Like that's always been Negazoo's problem, and that's not good in this format. But it's good versus yellow, so it's like merit as a tier 3 deck.
Tier 3, I am inclined to agree. Tier 3.
It has a really bad blue matchup. Playing your cards and having them stunned forever sounds great.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
just free George, free Sora Joe.
Yeah, this deck is just polarized matchups, the deck.
Yeah. All right, and the last deck we're going to talk about is just regular old Rookie Rush. What do we think about this deck, Bryce?
I think it's tier 2. It's still Rookie Rush. It's still just going to dome some players and draw way more consistently than you. But it's just other decks just kind of have better options, better tools to deal with it, or do what it wants to do better in the form of like Red Hybrid, where you just want to take the security out really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still just a uber consistent deck that just keeps playing stuff and hitting you. So it's probably tier 2. But as the game's developing, there's just more and more answers that every deck is getting to answer this strategy.
Yes, sir. And I feel like this deck probably has like a not good blue hybrid matchup.
Yeah, blue hybrid just stuns all their cards and gets value off Sora Joe. Green hybrid just has the tools to kill it now pretty efficiently.
Yep.
Yellow hybrid just heals it out of the game. So its matchup spread's getting worse and worse, and decks are getting answers. But it's just by the nature of the deck, I think it's still probably tier 2. It might have dropped to tier 3, but right now I'd say tier 2.
I agree. All right, so we've pretty much gotten to the end of the tier list. I do have a few YouTube comments. I promised some viewers that we'd go over some of their comments if they looked good. So let's see here. We have Coffee Dude Abel saying, Red Hybrid has the best high roll in the game by far. Can easily check 3 security turn 2 and set up for game turn 3 with a good draw. So we did kind of cover this, right? Where Red Hybrid can definitely high roll, but I said that even if they do hit that turn 2 play, sometimes they just run out of steam. And if we're talking about red decks that high roll, I think Jessamon high roll is probably a little stronger than this one. What do you think, Bryce?
Red Hybrid's high roll is pretty good, but have you ever just lost the game from one stack? That's Jessamon. Yeah. So I think Jessamon's high roll is just a little bit over Red Hybrid's, but they're similar in strength. I'd say Red Hybrid has more of like a consistent aggressive game plan on top of its high roll, where Jessamon is kind of all in on getting to Jessamon and making a lot of value. And even if your Jessamon doesn't win the game immediately, you now have you have the tools of like the sister mons that give you blocker or gating healing and stuff like that.
Agreed. All right, so he goes on to say, Cherubimon with yellow base is great. We agree. Easy yellow matchup, and with side deck can shore up the blue matchup. Yep, I think he's right on point with that. What do you think, Bryce?
Yeah, I played a little bit of this matchup. It felt as the blue hybrid player, it felt pretty decent for blue, but they do have answers, especially because you're not a fast deck if you're playing blue, so you do give them a little bit of time to set up. It feels bad because they're a deck that wants to be deleted, and you just strip all their sources, so you don't get any of the inheritable effects.
Yep. But
it still has game, especially because one of the things it can summon is Bushy Agumon, so you can just burst out of nowhere, which is really strong too.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then he has 2 more points. First on blue, he says, blue, probably the most consistently well-performing deck, would easily be best if yellow wasn't as popular, as that's the hardest matchup, but also gets way easier with side deck. I think we tend to agree.
I think your side deck for blue is just, in that case, is just get more late game, but I haven't like experienced the matchup enough to really make comment, but I know it's a bad matchup. I know the reasoning. Yellow wins in the attrition war against most decks, and blue is kind of an attrition deck, slowly getting 1-2 checks at a time. Mm-hmm. So it is, but it's really consistent. That deck has a million searchers, blue inherent draw power. It refreshes its level 4, so it has a bunch of things that Digi-Evolve into. It is incredibly a consistent deck.
Yep. All right, and then his last point is about green hybrid with red base is almost as explosive as red and much more resilient. Very good deck, just gets hard countered with side deck. Yes, it does, but probably best deck for a tournament with no side deck used. So I will say that I agree that the deck gets absolutely hosed by side deck. Gaussmon, Siakomon, and Cutemon are just GG buttons. But I will say also, as the green hybrid player, you can go ahead and side in hate for those cards as well. If you're playing red base, Atomic Blaster can always come in. That's a good card to side in. But overall, I will say that green-red is a very, very strong Tier 1 deck, and it is a deck that has great matchups against pretty much everything, and you can always win out against anything. So
I mean, do those side X cards even hurt that much? A lot of your stuff is just suspend and remove afterwards. So
Yeah, it feels
you kind of it slows you down for a turn, but then you just deal with the problem. And
well, it's like any floodgate. Like you have to see your answer, and if you don't see your answer, then you're just gonna scoop up your cards. So
yeah, but as a deck that has so much search for its answer, I feel like this it's not too difficult because what you have your Thunder Laser and your Kabuterimon that suspends.
yeah, it's just a matter of seeing your cards because yeah, you have Kabuterimon, Metal Kabu, which will suspend an attack over it, and then but that has to digivolve over a hybrid or a JP. So if you don't have hybrid or JP, then it does nothing. Or you can have Thunder Laser, but that only activates if you have a hybrid or 10 warriors on your board, which fared like that's most of your deck. But there are opportunities where like maybe you can't get it off, and then you also have to have enough memory to cast them and then attack over it. So it's tough. It's tough.
Okay.
All right. So thank you to Coffee Dude Abel. Awesome comment. We pretty much, for the most part, agree with everything, maybe except for the red hybrid point. Just on high rolls a little bit more. But yeah. All right. Any closing comments, Bryce, before we end the tier list?
I mean, it's nice that our tier 1 is basically 4.5 different colors. It's
true.
We have a pretty diverse format right now. Although it's just there's a lot of tamers, and I will say it is tricky, kind of playing around how uninteractive it is. Like how much anti-tamer hate we have is like almost nothing.
Yeah.
So that is the only feels bad about the format. Otherwise, I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, it's definitely a different skill set from last format. You really have to adjust the way you play. I remember the first tournament we played BT7, I was thrown for like such a loop because it felt so different than last format. Like all the decks were different, playstyle completely different. Like you just had to really change everything about the way you were playing. It felt really weird, but also really good. It's nice to change it up.
Yeah, and we tied at our tournament.
Yeah, nice strong 3-way tie.
3-way tie of 3 tier 1 decks.
Yeah, that's true. It's a green, purple, and yellow all at the top. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? All right, Bryce. Thanks for joining me once again for a video. Hope you guys enjoyed the tier list, and we'll see you in the next one. GG's.
No problem. Sounds good.
Yeah.